The company needs to evolve beyond your limited capabilities, old sister, Dylan said smugly, sliding termination papers across the mahogany desk. Time to make room for real innovation. I picked up the document with steady hands, maintaining the neutral expression that had become second nature during 15 years of corporate politics. For a moment, I locked eyes with my younger brother. His triumphant smirk contrasted sharply with the tastefully framed family photos behind him, artifacts of a supposed legacy of loyalty. My name is Vanessa King, and at 44, I had spent a third of my life developing and managing the proprietary software system that powered Kingline Ventures, our family's logistics and inventory firm based in Pittsburgh. I wasn't just the IT lead. I had built the entire system from scratch, writing countless lines of code to create a framework that managed real-time shipments, automated billing, and tracked vendors across 3 continents. Is this really how you want to start your tenure as managing director? I asked, tapping the termination papers against the table to align their edges. Not even a week in the big office and already making sweeping changes? Dylan leaned back in our father's chair, a chair that, despite being reupholstered twice, still carried the impression of our father's commanding presence. But unlike our father, whose decisions were tempered with experience and consideration, Dylan had always acted on impulse and ego. The board agrees we need fresh perspectives, he replied, adjusting his silk tie. They've approved bringing in Vortex Solutions to overhaul our digital infrastructure. Their team will modernize everything: machine learning, cloud integration, the works. Things I've been advocating for years while you've kept us tethered to your homemade system. I almost laughed at how he said homemade, like I'd been knitting scarves instead of engineering an integrated logistics framework that had saved the company millions and outperformed every commercial alternative. But I didn't correct him. I never did. That was perhaps my greatest mistake over the years, assuming that my work would speak for itself. You have 2 weeks of severance, Dylan continued. Human Resources has already processed everything. Your credentials will remain active until end of day tomorrow to tie up any loose ends. As I rose from my chair, I noticed my brother already looking past me, at his computer screen, moving on. He didn't see the slight smile that crossed my face, not one of acceptance, but of understanding. Dylan had never bothered to comprehend what I actually did for Kingline Ventures, and very soon that ignorance would become painfully apparent. Growing up as the Kings of Pittsburgh had its challenges. Our father, Edward King, built Kingline Ventures from a 2-truck operation into a regional powerhouse that coordinated logistics for manufacturers across the Rust Belt. We lived in a sprawling Victorian in Shadyside, a world of private schools and country club memberships. While Dylan excelled at sports and charming adults at business dinners, I gravitated toward computers and mathematics. My father recognized my analytical mind early, buying me my first computer when I was 12. By 16, I was creating basic inventory tracking programs. When I graduated with my computer science degree, he didn't hesitate to bring me into the family business. One day, the world will run on information more than steel, he told me, displaying a rare prescience for someone who'd built his fortune on physical infrastructure. You'll help us stay ahead of that curve. My first major contribution came when our existing logistics software, an expensive third-party solution, failed during a major client onboarding. Working through 3 sleepless nights, I developed a stopgap measure that not only salvaged the client relationship, but proved more efficient than the original system. That was when Dad gave me the green light to develop a complete proprietary system. Build something just for us, he said. Something that fits exactly how we work. Over the next decade, I did exactly that, layering in specialized modules, custom-designed APIs, and lightning-fast routing algorithms that accommodated our growing business. The system became our competitive edge, allowing us to undercut competitors while maintaining higher profit margins. But as my system became indispensable, my role as its creator was increasingly taken for granted. Dylan, meanwhile, returned from business school with grand theories about disruption and digital transformation. He'd dismiss my work during board meetings, calling it legacy technology, while proposing partnerships with flashy tech startups. Our father always mediated, understanding that Dylan's vision had merit, but appreciating the reliability of what I'd built. "Your brother sees the future," Dad would tell me during our regular coffee meetings. "But you've built our present. Both matter." Then came Dad's unexpected retirement announcement, accelerated by minor heart issues. The board's choice of Dylan for managing director stung, but didn't surprise me. He had the charisma and connections that I lacked, plus a vision that sounded exciting to members who didn't understand the technical complexities involved. What did surprise me was how quickly he moved to dismantle what I'd built. The termination papers in my hands represented more than personal rejection. They signaled a fundamental misunderstanding of how deeply my code was woven into the company's operations. I cleared my desk methodically that afternoon, packing away 15 years of professional life into a single cardboard box. The few personal items, a potted succulent, framed photos of hiking trips, a small collection of tech conference lanyards, seemed inadequate representations of my time at Kingline. Jennifer from Human Resources hovered awkwardly nearby, tasked with ensuring I didn't steal company property or sabotage anything on my way out. She was new, barely 6 months with the company, and clearly uncomfortable with evicting someone who had occupied this office longer than most employees had been with the firm. "I'm really sorry about this, Vanessa," she said in a hushed tone. "Everyone in IT is shocked." "It's business," I replied, though we both knew it wasn't. It was personal, the culmination of a sibling rivalry that had finally found its resolution. I glanced at my computer screen one last time. Open on it was the dashboard for the Kingline Integrated System, KIS as the team called it. The interface was deceptively simple, showing real-time status of hundreds of shipments, color-coded inventory levels across warehouses, and financial projections updated to the minute. What wasn't visible was the complexity beneath. The custom architecture I'd built, maintained, and continuously improved for years. I had 24 hours before my credentials were revoked. 24 hours to decide what to do with the knowledge in my head that wasn't documented anywhere else. "Protocol says I need to ask for your master password override," Jennifer said, reading from her offboarding checklist. I smiled slightly. "It's in the system documentation. Dylan has access to all that now." This wasn't entirely true. While basic documentation existed, the deeper architecture, the shortcuts, the workarounds, the contingency protocols, those lived only in my mind and in secured notes that weren't part of the official documentation. Not out of malice or job security fears, but because complex systems evolve organically, and documentation always lags behind reality. As I walked toward the elevator, carrying my small box of belongings, I passed the glass-walled conference room where Dylan was meeting with representatives from Vortex Solutions. Through the glass, I could see him gesturing enthusiastically while a team of consultants nodded along, their sleek presentation displayed on the wall screen. One slide caught my eye. Seamless migration from legacy systems. I almost stopped to tell them there was nothing seamless about integrating with KS, that the system was deliberately designed with security layers that required specific knowledge to navigate. I almost warned them about the cascading dependencies that could trigger catastrophic failures if modified incorrectly. Almost. Instead, I stepped into the elevator and pressed the lobby button. I hadn't built back doors or booby traps into the system. I'd always been too professional for that. I didn't need to sabotage anything. The system itself, with all its complexity and customization, would do that for me if mishandled. As the elevator doors closed, I realized I felt lighter than I had in years. 3 days passed in a strange, unfamiliar calm. Without the constant ping of crisis emails and the pressure of system maintenance, I found myself with time I hadn't experienced since college. I slept past 6 a.m., went for morning runs along the Monongahela River, and actually sat down for breakfast instead of gulping coffee on the way to the office. On the 3rd morning after my termination, I was enjoying a leisurely coffee on my balcony when my personal phone vibrated. Caitlin Zhou's name flashed on the screen, head of client services at Kingline, and one of the few colleagues I considered a friend. Vanessa? Her voice carried an unmistakable edge of panic. Are you watching this? Watching what? The Westbridge presentation. Dylan's doing it live on the company feed for all departments to see. He's about to... She broke off, and I heard commotion in the background. Oh God, it's happening again. I pulled up the company's internal live stream on my tablet, using the credentials that apparently hadn't been deactivated yet. The video showed our largest conference room, where Dylan stood before executives from Westbridge Manufacturing, a potential client worth at least $15 million annually. He was mid-sentence, gesturing toward the large display behind him that showcased the KIS dashboard, which allows us to guarantee 99.8% on-time delivery and complete transparency across your supply chain, he was saying confidently. Then it happened. The dashboard behind him flickered, displaying a cascade of error messages before freezing completely. Dylan continued speaking for several seconds before realizing something was wrong. He glanced back, his professional smile faltering. Just a momentary glitch, he said, tapping frantically at his tablet. Let me just refresh the... But the system didn't refresh. Instead, a critical error message appeared. Database integrity compromised. System lockdown initiated. I knew exactly what had happened. The KIS had a self-protection protocol I'd implemented years ago after a corrupted update nearly destroyed our shipping data. When it detected potential data corruption, it would automatically lock down to prevent catastrophic loss. Restarting required a specific sequence of commands and administrator verification, a procedure only I had performed until now. Dylan was still trying to recover, his confident demeanor crumbling. Our technical team will have this resolved momentarily, he assured the increasingly skeptical-looking Westbridge executives. My phone began lighting up with texts and calls, from IT staff, from operations managers, and finally from Dylan himself. I silenced it and continued watching the disaster unfold. Within minutes, reports began flooding the emergency channel in the company's messaging system. Warehouse terminals offline, shipping labels unable to generate, billing system frozen. The entire operation had ground to a halt. A sick satisfaction settled in my stomach, followed immediately by guilt. These were still my colleagues struggling through no fault of their own. The clients being affected had done nothing wrong. Only Dylan deserved this humiliation. My phone rang again, this time displaying Edward King, my father. I hesitated before answering. Vanessa. His voice carried none of its usual commanding presence. Instead, he sounded tired, worried. The system's down. I know, I replied. I'm watching it happen. Dylan says it's a systematic failure, that your architecture was fundamentally flawed and finally collapsed. I laughed bitterly. Of course he'd say that. The system isn't flawed. It's protecting itself from whatever they're trying to do to it. A long silence stretched between us before my father spoke again. Can you fix it? The question hung in the air. Could I? Certainly. Would I? That was more complicated. I don't work for Kingline anymore, Dad, I finally said. Dylan made that very clear. My father sighed heavily through the phone. This isn't just about you and Dylan, Vanessa. There are 300 employees whose jobs depend on getting things running again, not to mention our clients. The guilt I'd felt earlier intensified. He was right. My satisfaction at Dylan's predicament came at the expense of many innocent people. But the wounded part of me, the part that had been dismissed and discarded after 15 years of dedication, wasn't ready to concede. Dylan should have thought about that before firing the only person who fully understands the system, I replied. Besides, he has Vortex Solutions now. Aren't they supposed to be modernizing everything? Vanessa, my father started, but I interrupted him. I'm sorry, Dad. I have a job interview in an hour. I have to go. This wasn't entirely a lie. I did have an interview scheduled that morning with Caravel Logistics, a mid-sized competitor that had reached out almost immediately after word of my departure from King Line spread through the industry. Their CTO had been trying to poach me for years. As I dressed for the interview, I couldn't help checking the King Line emergency channel again. The situation was deteriorating. Regional managers were reporting that trucks were idle, drivers were waiting for instructions, and warehouses couldn't process incoming or outgoing shipments. Conservative estimates put the cost of the outage at $50,000 per hour, and climbing. My interview with Caravel went exceptionally well. Their technical team asked intelligent questions about system architecture and showed genuine interest in my approach to logistics software. The CTO, Lawrence Bennett, didn't hide his excitement at the prospect of having me build something for them. "We've been trapped in vendor solutions for too long," he explained as he walked me out. "Having someone in-house who could create something tailored to our needs would be revolutionary." "Someone like me, you mean?" I said with a smile. "Exactly like you." He handed me a folder. "This is our offer. It's aggressive. We want you to know how serious we are. Take a few days to think about it." Back in my car, I opened the folder and nearly gasped. The compensation package was almost double what I'd been making at King Line, with substantial equity and the title of Chief Technology Officer. It was everything I deserved but had never received at the family company. My phone was still blowing up with messages from King Line. I scrolled through them briefly. Dylan demanding I answer his calls, the IT team begging for access codes, even board members reaching out directly. The last message caught my eye, from Caitlin. "Westbridge walked. Dylan is blaming you publicly, saying you sabotaged the system before leaving. Board emergency meeting in progress. Please call me." I felt a surge of anger. Sabotage? I'd spent 15 years building and protecting that system. Its current failure was simple. The Vortex team had likely tried to force integration without understanding the security protocols, triggering the lockdown sequence. Before I could think better of it, I called Dylan. He answered immediately. "Thank God. You need to fix this right now, Vanessa. This is corporate sabotage, and I'm prepared to take legal action." "Stop!" I cut him off. "I didn't sabotage anything. Your fancy consultants triggered a security protocol by trying to force access. If you'd bothered to ask me for a proper handover instead of ambushing me with termination papers, I could have explained how the system works." "Then fix it," he demanded. "Now." "That's not how this works, Dylan. I'm not your employee anymore, remember? You made that abundantly clear." There was a moment of stunned silence before he spoke again, his voice suddenly conciliatory. "What do you want? To come back? Fine. You can have your job back." I couldn't help but laugh. "My job back? After you humiliated me and questioned my capabilities? I don't think so." By evening, the situation at King Line had reached crisis level. Through Caitlin, I learned that the board had called an emergency session where Dylan was struggling to explain both the system failure and his decision to terminate me without a transition plan. The Vortex Solutions team had admitted they couldn't access the core system architecture without proper documentation. Documentation that didn't exist in the official repositories. I sat in my living room, nursing a glass of wine and weighing my options. The Caravel offer was tempting. A clean break, a fresh start, recognition I'd never received at King Line. But 15 years of my life were embedded in the KIS. Watching it fall apart felt like watching a part of myself being dismantled. My doorbell rang at 9 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw Dylan standing there looking disheveled, his normally immaculate hair mussed, his designer suit wrinkled. After a moment's hesitation, I opened the door. "You win, okay?" he said before I could speak. "I was wrong. We need you. I need you." I leaned against the doorframe, studying my younger brother. At 40, Dylan still carried himself with the entitled confidence of the golden child, the son who had followed perfectly in our father's footsteps while I carved my own technical path. But now, for perhaps the first time, I saw genuine desperation in his eyes. "The board is furious. he continued when I didn't respond. They're talking about emergency leadership changes. Dad is disappointed. Everyone's blaming me. As they should, I replied calmly. You fired the architect of the system that runs the entire company without ensuring knowledge transfer. That's not just bad business, it's negligent leadership. He flinched but didn't argue. Tell me what you want. Name your price to fix this. I stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. In my living room, I pulled out my laptop and brought up the Caravel offer letter. Caravel wants me to build them exactly what I built for Kingline, I said, turning the screen toward him. This is what they think I'm worth. Dylan's eyes widened as he saw the compensation package. This is outrageous. They're just trying to steal our technology through you. No, Dylan. They're recognizing my value, something Kingline never did. I closed the laptop. I don't want to be just an IT manager anymore. I want my role to reflect what I actually contribute. What are you saying? I want a board seat and the title of Chief Technology Officer, equal compensation to yours, and complete autonomy over the technical division. I met his gaze steadily. Those are my terms. Dylan laughed incredulously. You can't be serious. The board would never. Then enjoy explaining to them how you plan to rebuild 15 years of proprietary development from scratch. I interrupted. I'm sure the shareholders will understand when the stock plummets. A tense silence filled the room as my brother processed the situation. I could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes, weighing his pride against the immediate crisis and his longer-term prospects if Kingline suffered a prolonged outage. The board meets again tomorrow morning, he finally said. I'll present your terms, but I can't guarantee they'll accept everything. That's fine, I replied. But I won't step foot in the office or touch a line of code until they do. The system will remain down until then. After Dylan left, I poured myself another glass of wine and stepped out onto my balcony. The Pittsburgh skyline glittered against the night sky, and for the first time in years, I felt truly in control of my destiny. Whether I returned to Kingline on my terms or accepted Caravel's offer, one thing was certain. I would never again allow my contributions to be minimized or taken for granted. The next morning, I walked into Kingline's headquarters, wearing a tailored power suit I'd purchased but rarely worn. The receptionist's eyes widened when she saw me, and whispers followed as I crossed the lobby. Word of my return had clearly spread. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 12 pairs of eyes tracked me as I took my seat at the table, not in my usual chair against the wall as an invited technical advisor, but in a proper leather chair between my father and Josephine Winters, our longest-serving board member. Dylan stood at the head of the table, looking like he'd aged years overnight. Behind him, a projection displayed the ongoing system outage metrics. 27 hours of downtime, estimated losses approaching $1. 4 million, 42 delayed shipments, and 17 angry client escalations. Ms. King has agreed to address our technical situation, Dylan announced, his voice carefully controlled. The board has reviewed and accepted her conditions for return. I noted the formal Ms. King rather than my sister, or Vanessa, a small but telling choice that distanced him from the decision. Several board members nodded appreciatively in my direction, while others watched warily, perhaps wondering if I'd deliberately caused the crisis. Before we proceed, I said, opening my laptop, I want to be clear about what happened. The system failure wasn't sabotage or poor design. It was a security protocol I implemented years ago to prevent data corruption. When unauthorized access attempts triggered it, the system did exactly what it was programmed to do, protect itself. I projected my screen, showing the KS master interface, a view none of them had seen before. Behind the sleek user dashboard was a complex matrix of system health indicators, security protocols, and override mechanisms. What you're seeing is the true heart of Kingline's competitive advantage, I explained. A proprietary system that's been customized and optimized over 15 years. It can't simply be replaced by an off-the-shelf solution or rushed migration. The board members leaned forward, suddenly understanding the true value of what I'd built. Even Dylan seemed to grasp finally that my limited capabilities had created something remarkable. With the board's unanimous endorsement of my return, including my new title, compensation, and board seat, I set about restoring Kingline's systems. The process took less than an hour, though I deliberately walked the IT team through each step, ensuring knowledge transfer that should have happened years ago. As systems came back online across the company, the relief was palpable. The messaging channels filled with celebratory messages, warehouse managers reported resuming operations, and drivers finally received their routing instructions. The financial damage was substantial but containable, a painful lesson in technical debt and proper succession planning. The next week brought a flurry of changes. My office moved to the executive floor, adjacent to Dylan's. The IT department was reorganized under my direct leadership, with a mandate to document the system properly and train multiple team members on its architecture. And most satisfyingly, the Vortex Solutions contract was renegotiated from a full replacement to a collaborative enhancement project, working with my team rather than displacing us. Dylan maintained a professional distance, our interactions limited to necessary business discussions. The sibling relationship remained fractured, but I found I didn't mind. Respect was more valuable than familial warmth, especially in a corporate environment. The most meaningful change came from my father. At our first weekly coffee meeting since my return, he acknowledged what he'd failed to see for years. "I always thought Dylan would lead Kingline because he reminds me of myself," he admitted. "But the truth is, you're the one who's truly innovated, who's built something from nothing. I was wrong not to see that sooner." The validation felt good, but I realized it was no longer necessary. The crisis had proven my worth beyond question. To the board, to our employees, and most importantly, to myself. My new business cards arrived that Friday. Vanessa King, Chief Technology Officer, Board Member. Looking at them, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge, and everything to do with finally receiving the recognition I'd earned. As the dust settled and operations returned to normal, I reflected on how sweet success tasted when it came from standing your ground rather than tearing others down. I hadn't needed to sabotage anything. I just had to wait for the gap I left behind to reveal its true size.